Hi, everybody. This is Keith Reynolds. Welcome to PublioSTUDIO and the Marketplace podcast. I'm here with Joseph Franklyn McElroy, a colleague for many years. Hey, Joseph.
Hi, Keith. How are you doing, man?
Good, good. Welcome to the studio. And why don't you give a little background on yourself, and we'll get going on our sovereign server discussion.
I am a long-term tech and marketing guy, having been in this world since I was a child in the 70s, starting working with Altair computers, and I've been a part of every major revolution since then, including the dot-com, Bing a Bang, and mobile and AI now. I most recently have had, well, not most recently, I have a company called Galileo Tech Media, which I'm the chief architect and founder of. And it was traditionally an SEO technical firm. And we had clients like Marriott doing large scale SEO content and even technical work for them. Then more recently, I had during COVID, I had a stint owning a mountainside motel and restaurant, and learned what brick and mortar business is all about until, believe it or not, I got flooded in the mountains by a hurricane. And now I'm back in New York City and using all that experience, actually brick and mortar and working for small business for a small business and creating what I'm calling a sovereign operational system, or what we're calling together as a business sovereign server.
And we reconnected in your move back to New York on building out the Charged Up newsletter, and you providing technical services on that. And out of that conversation, we figured out a way to productize what we were doing and call it Sovereign Server. And the idea being that why put your data and all your workflows up in LLMs? You've already put everything up in SaaS, and you're basically renting your business, and losing your sovereignty. And we figured out a way to have a layer between you, your SaaS products, and your frontier LLMs, and to start to take that sovereignty back, which was really sort of the background of how we got started.
Yeah, I mean, I came out of the mountains, and having gone through that experience, really sort of not happy with the nature of SaaS and online middlemen and how they perform their businesses with regards to small business. You know, back in the day, a typical motel maybe spent 10% of its budget of its revenue on marketing. Now, a typical small lodging will spend anywhere from 40 to 70% of their revenue on marketing, because the middlemen, you got OTAs, you got Google ads, you got direct bookings, you've got meta search, are all taking a cut. And that's because there's no real alternative for them to do, because the drive-by traffic is not really producing large amounts of reservations. The only thing they can do if they really get into it is create experiences, make their place a destination. But a lot of people don't have the wherewithal to do that. It can be very expensive. So I was looking at coming out of that, and having also got back into the SEO world, and then AEO, I saw what some of the products out there were doing in terms of creating moats that try to trap you into their systems by keeping your data and your customers' data. And I thought, this is a situation that's ripe for renovation and revolution and whatever else you want to call it. So my philosophy is now that most businesses think they own a business, but in reality, they rent access to customers from platforms.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about that, you're renting your business. And if you look at, the businesses that thrive and survive, they own the things that make their business unique. And we've been putting things up in SaaS, and now we've got large language models. Tell us a little philosophy around owning, not renting.
Well, the business, I believe fundamentally that the businesses that are going to survive, the next decade, won't just own their products and services. They're going to own the intelligence. They're going to have to own their own intelligence, and that means their secret sauce that makes them different, and how they go get customers. I say that, for example, in the hospitality industry, you're going to have to go and try to anticipate search and capture intent before people even start searching. And there's ways to do that with AI.
Interesting. And so what are some of the bigger mistakes then that people are making when they're putting their business?
They're buying tools instead of AI. I mean, they're buying tools that use AI in the background. They put their data up there. They're basically just repeating the SaaS model. And the SaaS people are trying to get their subscriptions, and they got now they got both your intelligence and your data. They got two moats to keep you around. So it's a big mistake. You don't want to be doing that. You want to make sure that you own your data and you own your intelligence. If you don't do that, they're going to suck you dry.
So you've got in this new world of AI, right? I think a lot of people are used to working with a chat and doing research and writing or creating content or coding, but now we're moving into an era where we've got automated workflows, we've got agents, and in addition to the intelligence, really an entirely new approach to your business is using these in content. When you talk about owning the intelligence, it's the workflows plus the data plus the agents that you build, and then that intelligence layer that continually learns from that. And
what most people don't get is there's two different models there. Chat seems so friendly and seems so like, oh, they're not out to get me. It's out here to create a positive relationship with me. But when you really want to automate and you want to really get efficiencies from AI and automation, you have to go through APIs. And the APIs charge based upon what's called a token, which is like 3 characters of text. And you get charged pennies, sometimes more, for every token that you both send up and every token that comes down. You ever notice when you're doing AI in getting these answers back, boy, some of those answers are like, I don't even need a third of this answer. You're telling me that I could be washed my shoes, but I could have also washed my hair, and I could have washed my teeth, and I could have done this, and I could have done that. And you know what? If you ask me this another question, I'll give you a lot more of what you could have washed. All right. They're purposely getting you used to consuming a lot of tokens. So if you do go into the API world, you're going to be spending a lot of money if you're not careful. And that is that doesn't have to exist. You can do most of what AI does with a model locally that you don't have to pay token costs for at all.
So one of the things we've talked about is kind of segregating out the general knowledge of the large frontier LLMs, and then having your own LLM on your sovereign server that's trained on your specific knowledge. I love your story about the orange.
Yeah, well, there's 2 stories they tell. One is the general who, my dad was a contractor, and guys would come up into the mountains to build themselves a house and do stuff, and they'd come to him because he was one of the best around. And there's one guy who's a retired general, came up there, and he wanted to be involved. And he came driving with the long bed truck one day and insisted on driving it to his place himself. My dad tried to tell him something, but he wasn't really listening. He had to go down a very steep road, across a very small creek, and then back up a very steep road. Well, the problem is when you take a long bed truck down that steep, try to go over a small ravine and go back up, the back end lodges in the one side you're coming from, the front end lodges in the first side you're going to, and you're stuck, which is exactly what happened. This general had a lot of knowledge, but it's general knowledge. It wasn't very specific, and he didn't know about that particular local, context information. Now, the other story is my parents owned a little motel, and I lived there, and a guy came up in a busted up old truck, dirty old blue jeans, deep south, Florida accent I could barely understand, wanting to see my dad. And I go in there and was a little dismissive. I said, "There's this stupid guy coming to see you." And my dad looked around and said, "I ain't a stupid guy." I mean, owns several of the biggest orchards, orange orchards in Florida. He's a multimillionaire many times over. And you know what I take from that eventually over time is that local contents, knowing your soil, knowing your trees, and knowing what best to plant is going to make you rich, not general knowledge.
If somebody were to start a business today, what advice would you give them that's different than just 5 years ago?
The winners won't have the most AI tools. They'll have the best AI systems.
So
Very
it's
simple.
a systems approach as opposed to using tools.
Yeah, you know, we for the last 20 years after the dot-com phase, and then you get into mobile, we got into this this philosophy and this business structure of people building all these apps, people trying to capture little bits of territory and be the best at the, you know, the communication app, and the best at the content app, and the best at this app and stuff. And you end up having 200 tools. The average medium-sized business has 200 tools. And you're talking about, you know, 20, 30, $50,000 a month for some of that. More for bigger companies. They could be in the hundreds of thousands. And you know, and that, you know, maybe that was fine for a while, but it's come to the point where all of them building moats around their data, and it becomes harder and harder to get out of them. Even, an example even today is that, you know, I've been paying Calendly $10 a month for years, right? But you know, where I'm consolidated in is to Google Meet for various reasons, you know, dealing with the structures of the things I'm building. And so I went to get rid of Calendly. And then all of a sudden, a lot of things I'd built over the years stopped working. And it was like, I had to go and turn back Calendly on because I don't have time right now to go fix all those different things. So they have a little $10 moat around me. All right. Now I'll be eventually able to get rid of it. And it's not a bad service. It just, you know, it's not the one that's going into what I'm consolidating into. But that's a small example. You know, you get trapped, at least temporarily, sometimes for a long time. Sometimes you never recover. Sometimes they don't give you your data back. And you lost everything you've done for years. And, you know, depending upon that, remaining a benign environment is a fool's game. You know, I don't mind a lot of PE firms, but there's also a lot of PE firms that get out there, and the first thing they do is they try to figure out how to trap every customer, even more, make it more difficult for them to lead, be more stringent on payment, be more diligent about getting more absolute most value they can out of you without giving you value add back. So basically, they're trapping you with a moat, not giving any more to make it worthwhile, and then, you know, not letting you out. And, you know, all of a sudden, you're no longer an independent business person. You're now a serf in somebody's feudal system. And if too many of those apps that you're using become that way, you're not living a very happy life.
One of the things I've talked to people about is, you know, this didn't happen in a meeting, or there wasn't a strategy to do this. Your business is just kind of slowly over the years started to adopt more and more of these tools. You don't have anything in filing cabinets anymore. You don't own anything.
Well, you know,
there's a lot of advantages.
Yeah. Well, you know, yeah, you're right. You know, it's a systematic problem that happened in our society, right? I don't want to get too philosophical right now, but there was a time before the 70s when the customer was king, right? And then it became all of a sudden the shareholders are king. And that turned the mentality around, so that when companies were buying other companies, it was all about just maximizing value that you could extract, and not maximizing the value you gave back. Customers became cost centers. And that philosophy eventually leads to the destructive nature that some PE firms engage in. And if we don't have the reverse of that, it'll become worse and worse. But like all things, there is things swing back, and we're part of that swinging back.
Oh, and the technology has gotten to the point now where a lot of the things that you had to do in a SaaS model can now be recreated locally, so that you have that control over your business. And another element we've talked about is the agencies. We've both been working with companies and helping them grow, but that whole agency model is changing as well.
Yeah, the billable
Talk
hour
a
is
little
going to
bit
be dead.
about
That's exactly right. It becomes a math problem because you look, now you can do something for 10 hours. You charge $500 an hour for 10 hours. You've made $5,000, right? Well, now if AI reduces that down to 15 minutes, you're not making that $5,000. You can't afford the people that you got on staff. What do? You lie and say it still took 10 hours. Well, eventually you'll be discovered, and the customers won't like that, and they won't reward you for your honesty if you tell them. So you're going to have to look at different business models, which will be,
results
results
oriented.
oriented, or maybe you become the orchestrator of their systems. Maybe you operate their systems and you get paid for that, and you enhance their systems. You provide new additions to their system. The agency model has to go in that direction, because I think and some of them will go the token route, where they'll charge for instead of charging for the hour, they'll charge for the every three characters they produce, but they'll use AI to justify that. And that might be one model. I'd hate to see that, because that just becomes real expensive real quick.
It's similar to hours.
It's
There's no value.
It's not really adding value, right?
Right. Yeah. There's no value in an hour either.
Yeah.
So, I think
yeah. One last thing I forgot to mention that is very important in regards to what we're doing is that agencies, like you said, will sell outcomes, but they will also sell intelligence in a new way, right? Which is because you can embed systems and memory and knowledge into local LLMs. You can even do it on the frontier models, but then you're sort of just giving away your intelligence. You put it into your local models. That intelligence, that ability to think and do things, becomes a real value. Like we just created a content rewriter, right? Because a lot of blog posts are getting de-indexed by Google because of the switch over to AEO, right? And it's because the structure of blog posts need to be different now, right? They're encouraging people rather forcefully to change, right? To have more data, to have entities, to have answers, to have condensed information. They want that condensed information because it costs a lot to go and find lots of pages with answers about stuff, whereas you can find less pages with condensed information that packs a lot of punch in a small space. That's what they want, because then they don't have to spend as much crawling and not as much token cost. So what we did is we understood that, and we created an automation that uses our experience and knowledge to rewrite content in the way that it needs to be written and post it in a way that gets it immediately indexed. Our stuff is getting indexed almost too fast, and it actually starting to rank very quickly. And that's because the smarts that we're selling in this sort of automation.
And that was one of the first things that we worked on with Charged Up, the newsletter, so that now we're producing content, new content this way as well. And in the world of the sovereign server, this is the kind of application that you can have, that it's writing in your voice and then constructing content that goes out on the internet. And it's structured in a way similar to SEO, but it's the way the machines and people, we've actually noticed that the writing is actually easier to read as a human, in addition to being accessible by AI models. So you're using tools like this within your sovereign environment to create content.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, it's able to pack so much more information into an article, and do it in a way that's human friendly, right? So that it actually answers your questions better, faster, and quicker. And most of these blog posts, most of these things, that people don't read them for literature. They read them for the information, right? So when it provides that information and it's more information rich, it's actually better for everybody. And that's what's happening. I mean, there's still room for literature on the internet, but most agency blog posts are not about literature.
Right. And you add to that video as well. Shout out to Rob Weiss. He's been working and done some amazing AI video work, and that is also as you construct and post those videos, the ability to have the AI understand what's in the video as well. So now that's
video
all
and
emerging.
podcasts are becoming tremendous. Also, visual information. You got to realize that visual information, whether it's charts or video or whatever, is actually one of the most efficient mechanism to pack a lot of information into a small space, right?
Yep.
So an AI can see a visual because it's got character recognition. It can recognize what's in there. It can understand hierarchies. It can understand, like if there's a particular widget that you're developing a bunch of widgets, and you tell it, you can tell it a lot of things that this is an important widget. But when it sees it in a graphic where everything else points to that one thing, it knows without a doubt that that widget is the most important thing, and it treats it more so accordingly.
So structuring information is a part of your sovereignty, right? It's how you represent yourself and your business. And so you as a human have to go through the thought process, but we're entering an age where the platform can now be brought in-house, and you can control that a lot differently than the SaaS model that we've been using for the last 20, 30 years.
Well, hopefully not 30, right? Okay, we'll give it 25, 26 years. Not
25. Yeah. Well,
I guess
that's
96,
why I said 30.
96. Jesus Christ, it is 30 years. All right.
It is. But it's been a good run.
Yeah.
It's been a good run.
Yeah.
And, we did a lot of work to figure out how companies can work in that model. And now we're putting forward a really innovative way that you can take back the control and run your business online using the new wave.
Exactly.
Let's talk a little bit about leadership and the importance of being human in this process.
Leadership and experience is going to become more important, dramatically more important. AI is really about skills. All right. What it's replacing is skills. The ability to actually execute things quickly and efficiently and done well, right, is becoming more and more replaced by AI. But what it doesn't have is a human's ability to make judgments, right? It's like when you give it a bunch of written text saying something's important, and in the middle of things, it doesn't always get it. Now, when a human compresses that into an image that shows that this thing is connected to everything, right, it finally gets it. All right. There's it's a situation where like when AI goes out of control, when it starts hallucinating, when it loses its track, it doesn't know how to get back. A human has to put it back on track, and so and that's gonna extend into the whole organization and systems. You have to put together systems, and you have to know as a leader where the real pain points are. It might not be sexy, but it could be, the searching for the right articles to put in a newsletter, right? That could take hours and days, right? But it's not necessarily the most sexy thing to do. And it doesn't sound great as let's do an AI to find articles. It doesn't sound particularly sexy, but it could save the organization hundreds of hours a month. All right. A good leader.
Yeah. I'll just add, what we've done with the sovereign server approach is take a news that took over 24 hours roughly to create every week. when we acquired Charged Up to now it's down to around 6 hours. And that didn't take the people out of the system. It just took the time that it took us to do that and emphasize the judgment to know that we ran this article last week and it had this nuance and this is an update versus this is a new story. And how do we, it's just not there yet to do all the work. So the humans are an integral part.
Right. And real fundamental too is that AI does not function well in chaos. All right. Really these large language models are built upon vast amounts of human content, right? About video, about written content, about images, about talking. And it's indexed that, and it's built a whole intellectual sphere around. And it can be limited to, it can have a limited creativity in that because it can mix things together based upon patterns that it sees, but it's not really creative. It really can't just create magic out of the nothing, right? If something hasn't had some sort of existence before, it's not going to imagine a new existence. All right. What this also means is that leaders who create chaos are going to break the AIs. They're going to break the systems. They create chaos. They create things that cannot be understood and integrated into a system. Things that just don't make sense or have no precedence or whatever. That are just out of their leadership is going to have to be very, 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 focused on being disciplined and not creating chaos. Leave chaos to creative labs that are very, very focused on the creativity process. Pull something out of it, then give it to the AIs. But in your operations, you can't have chaos. And the bad leaders create chaos.
If you don't have a systems approach and you're using automation, then you're automating chaos, and it's just not. So you have to do the process work before, in order to make these systems work, and that really is the human side of this.
Mm-hmm. And there's another important thing about what's going to happen in terms of what's coming forward in terms of who's going to rise to the top of leadership is that, have you noticed that everybody's getting superpowers? Everybody's starting to get really great writing, and they're getting good analysis, and they're getting good reports, and they're getting everybody is getting superpowers. Anybody that's got a decent job and is doing a good job, and paying attention, they have to, who they're competing against, right?
And I think that replacing people is the wrong way to look at it, right?
It's not replacing them because they all become superpowers. But what's different is character. What makes the leaders are the characters, the one that can be disciplined, the one that can, not create chaos, the ones that can be trusted, the ones that have good judgment. Those are become the good leaders.
We've talked about that in terms of the sovereign server and having not just sovereignty, but stewardship, right? So it's that leadership that puts systems in place that are sustainable and that you can train others to operate.
Yeah, exactly.
So what's the difference between an AI powered company and a company that uses AI tools?
The one has AI, but the other has become AI native. One lives in a universe where they just think AI is a tool that's bolted on to do something. Others live in a universe where the AIs are just other native things in that environment, and they live with them and they work with them and make them integral parts of their processes and what they do. And the ones that just do AI tools are just going to be left behind, because AI tools by themselves, they might do a task that's pretty good, but that task might disappear, right? And the AI tool becomes obsolete. It might have cost a lot of money, because the systems around it have changed. The systems of the competitors changed. And this tool that did something is now just useless because it's part of a system that no longer exists. You need
So
AI systems that change with the system. It operates the system, it manages systems, but it's also in collaboration with humans, in collaboration with other systems, and that's all got to change and modulate together. So you got to be AI native.
And that's really sort of the underlying philosophy or design point of a sovereign server.
Yeah, is that the intelligence is down there right with you. You know, your intelligence not off on some distant center that's, you know, keeping it in a structure and maybe is no longer relevant to you. It's in your own memory. In your own intelligence. It's in your own operational systems, and it lives and breathes and modifies with you.
And we're not talking about tearing down what you have, right? We're talking about starting with an application, an area within your business, building some value, and then seeing what else you can attach to it, and brings it online gradually. So this is not a revolutionary.
I'm not trying to be. No, that's the reason I chose, readily available open source platforms to do a lot of the business processes. You know, the CRM, the audience management, the workflow orchestration layer. All these are, you know, open source platforms that have been around for a while. It's like you don't need to be revolutionary across all this. You put in automations, you put in road stops along the way, you make it part of the system for AI to get into the decision-making process. You know, and the decision-making process is not like, are we going to create this line of business and let's do it? The decision-making process is, hey, is this a lead, or is this just an inquiry? Is this person interested in buying, or is this not? Is this a social media post from a bot, or is it a real person who's upset about something? Is this is this complaint from a customer need to be addressed? Is there a problem with an employee, or is this, it's just, it's making the small decisions along the way that take a lot of time and getting them to be consistent in a system that works best when it is.
I found it also, we're so overloaded with information, right? So you're building the structures within your company that regulate the workflow so that you get the information when you need it.
Mm-hmm.
So that every company's sovereign server is going to be different. It's right.
They will all evolve. They have to, because it's like in the old days. The old days when we built systems, you build a system for a client and put it on a mainframe. Remember that? Everybody had a mainframe. Bigger companies, bigger small companies had little mainframes. And you know what they all insisted upon was that their invoicing process was unique from everybody in the industry. And so every one of them had to be customized on their invoice processing. There's every business, no matter even if they're following a model of some other business, every hotel that we had to do for Marriott had differences in the way they did things. They chose their keywords differently. They had reasons for denying content differently. Every single one of them, even though they had guidelines and things like that, every one of them was a small business with their own processes, their own opinions, their own way of doing things that worked for them. And they wanted that to be part of the process. That's going to happen whether AI gods like it or not. And that's why AI has to be down there with the little people, because that's where it lives.
And so what we're really talking about is an architecture that is as old as the mainframe, right? Since the beginning of computing, we've been having to organize things so that a computer can operate.
I mean, at the beginning of business, when you were doing things with paper and pencils and carbon copies, remember, you got to give the copy here, you got to do this copy, you got to send it to this person. Our systems have always been unique to the organization.
And talk a little bit about, I know in our philosophizing around the business, the idea idea of freedom versus dependency, and how this is, and again, back to the empowerment.
Well, the simple thing is dependency is expensive, right? If you're dependent upon an OTA, instead of giving 10% of your 20% of your money to the OTA, all of a sudden you're doing 50, 60, 70, 80% of your money to the OTA. Dependency can kill you. It can destroy your business, especially if who you're dependent upon thinks of you as a cost center. If they think of you as a cost center, you're going to be dead eventually. OTAs are killing the middle hotel. You go to hotels and, if they're nice ones, they're all sort of cookie cutter nice. And then you got Fleabag. The ones in the middle are becoming very, very far and in between. All right. Mm-hmm. And where you can have a nice experience. It's a nice room. It's not, tremendously luxurious, but it's enough for say you're in the mountains. You don't want necessarily a luxurious experience. You're on an adventure. You want an adventure. You want to have some local taste. You want to have some, things. You want to have uniqueness, right? Dependency doesn't allow any of that.
And for those who don't know, OTA is online travel agency, and they are responsible for bringing that first client to the hotel, right? And so what you're saying is the booking mechanism that these hotels depend on are actually hugely expensive, and really the only way as a hotel, right? Yeah. And the same for the ordering systems with restaurants. They take between advertising and these systems that connect to people, they're giving up 50, 60, 70% of their margin on that first customer. So it's really important to have repeat business.
Yeah. And, it's just going to get worse as more roll-ups happen, because the people rolling these up don't really know about creating. Sorry. Some of them, I know that's an overgeneralization. There's some that are creative, but most of them are not. And they go in and they're not looking for creative ways to add value. They're looking for ways to extract more value without costing anything and without giving away anything. All right. And that inevitably leads to ugly experiences for the customer. Right. Inevitably makes it just, really a bad experience. And it permeates our society. It's like, they made plenty of money with airplanes when they were nice and comfortable. Now they purposely try to create pain for people that are buying cheap seats, right? Purposely. All right. That maybe makes sense financially, and maybe in the philosophy of that shareholder is king, it makes sense. But fundamentally, it deteriorates the quality of life that we all have across the society. The thing where only shareholders are the ones to be concerned about has been proven that it wasn't a valid economic theory, but it maintains its status because billionaires and millionaires like it, but it's not valid as a philosophy. That we have a responsibility as small business people, working with small business people and conglomerates of small business people, to actually make them effective models, but with the concern for the customer as a human, as a fellow person in this journey of life that we're all taking, right? And we can still make plenty of money. I like to make money. I like to make lots of money, and I have no intentions of not being without a little money, but I don't need to do it at the ultimate expense of thousands and hundreds of thousands of millions of people. All right. That extra dime I get per person for taking away one of their fingernails is not worth
it. And having your business then designed around the way you work and systematizing things actually gives you a lot of independence. It gives you something that you can train people to do. Talk a little bit about the kind of jobs that are going to be more in demand in the future.
Well, I'll tell you what won't exist. All right. What's going to be hard to exist anymore is the information middleman. All right. These are this is, I hate to say it, but it's going to be hard for them to be justified. People who just do basic research, you know, not in depth, intellectual research, but basic research, um, manual reporting, creating, beautiful manual reports is going to be gone. Low level content production. With Marriott, we had somebody producing captions for photos, and they made $150,000 a year. That's all they did that year. All right, and I made quite a bit of money on top of that. That doesn't exist anymore. All right, AI, those kind of things are being gone, and then a lot of administrative coordination roles where you're just coordinating things are going to go away.
So
So what
what
will emerge? Yeah.
I
Uh,
was just going there with AI operators and orchestrators and intelligence architects and the kind of
yeah,
jobs that we're going to have in the future.
that's exactly right. Intelligent architects, operators, and workflow designers. Understanding the workflow of an organization. We're seeing that as we go through this. Even something as simple as how you pick the articles that are going to be in a newsletter is an orchestration of a workflow. And how do you translate that into an AI orchestration is a bit of a challenge. It takes thought and takes collaboration with the people doing it and the people coding it, right? So the workflow designers are going to become very important. There's going to be memory engineers. How do you most effectively store and retrieve memory and store it? They store a lot of things in AI as chunks of information, right? And they break it up and they store it in chunks and they create number codes representing what does that information have in terms of meaning and context and stuff like that. And when they search through those numbers, find the ones with the most numbers that match what you're talking about, and they bring those chunks up together. Hopefully they're from the same piece a lot of times. If they're not, you're going to be broken up half a sentence. And then they try to use that to produce their content, right? So that, and then they go to, more complex, memory that has got graphs and stuff like that, representing things, how they interconnect and things like that. So somebody has to design all that and continuously design that to be more effective. If you are in a industry where the content has to be long to be completely, express an idea, and it gets chunked up and only part of the chunk is brought back, that can, give very stunted answers. Whereas other industries where there's lots of concise information produced, and you can chunk it each individually, that's a different kind of style. So there's going to be people designing these memory systems for different industries, even just different companies, how they want to retrieve information.
I
Then
was
there
at a, I was at a gathering the other day, and two people, there were probably 100 people in the room, two people had been doing this on an individual basis, right? They wake up in the morning, their calendar is laid out, the people they're going to meet with are researched, they've got their bank statements, are easily available. They've just built their personal life. Now, multiply that, by a business that has 50 employees or 2,000 employees or multiple locations.
yeah
This idea of orchestrating and architecting that's, I think, one of the values of having this approach to a sovereign server for your business is there's a consistent way to start to build this so that you accumulate value in the business. It becomes something you can sell, right? Because it's self-documenting, and you're not taking the jobs away. You're getting people to do more today than yesterday.
Yeah, it's just the nature of what a lot of jobs are going to be is going to be different. There's going to be in the human AI orchestration space, there's going to be where do humans need to be in the system? Where do AIs need to be in the system? Where do you need human judgment? Where do you need AI? Manipulation and skills. That's going to be a whole job unto itself. And then we're talking about sovereign infrastructure. What data do you really need to own? and what data can be released, what information and intelligence do you need to put out there in the world? What do you need to protect? Are you going to be able to protect your 11 secret spices like Kentucky Fried Chicken has for a century? All right, in an open world, if you put it out there on a regular general AI, doubtful. You have to keep it. I have an experience. I know that information gets out. I had done a little tech thing where I generated a piece of code to do SSH into something, and it had generated the password I was using, and I was in a real hurry. I thought, what could it hurt? I just copied the code, put it in, tested, and got it. And I made a note to myself to go change it, but I didn't. All right, it goes into production, and just the other day, somebody hacked into my SMTP server and was sending out hundreds of thousands of emails using that password. All right. And the only way they could have got it is somehow they got a response in an AI that pulled that piece of code out that had that password in it. It gets out in the general AI. It gets out.
So there's a huge security component to building
this. It warns you. It warned me, say, don't put any passwords here. It did. All right. And I just was in a hurry and I just thought, well, can't hurt for a little bit. And I forgot about it. And then it got out. So, don't think that your information won't get out there if it's in the general AI. It will.
That's a warning. That's a warning shot across the bow. What other kinds of things should not be automated, in your opinion?
Should not be automated? Human relationships. Other than, maybe remembering to send your mother-in-law some roses and your wife a gift on the appropriate days. I think that, you need to cherish the relationships with people and don't automate that too much. I think that, don't automate too much customer relationships. They need to be touched every once in a while by a person, right? There's a lot of things like information gathering where they can go in and, get the information they need quickly and efficiently. They don't need to have a loving relationship with somebody to do that. That makes them happy if something is very fast and efficient, which AI can be much more sometimes than a person can be. But there's other ones where they're just pissed off and mad, and they need to talk to somebody that just says, it's going to be all right. We'll take care of you. All right. That they need to hear that too.
So what makes us uniquely human then in this world?
Well, one of the things I said is that's judgment, right? That's the ability to decide what matters, right? That fundamentally is what one of the most important things about needing to be human. We can have a lot of things. It could be intuition. It could be chemical. It could be how we're feeling that day. What matters to us today is a lot of times just based upon how we're feeling today, right? But in other situations, it's about education and wisdom and the experience. We're embodied. Right? We know what it's like to feel like we're going to die. We know what it feels like to be scared that something's going to hurt us. We know what it's like to be so sad that we cry. We know what it feels like. An AI does not. All right? Even if they're embodied in a robot, they don't know what it feels like. And we have, because of that, we're superior in our judgment. We know how it's going to make somebody else feel. All right? We know what something's going to cause. What is it, even if it doesn't necessarily cause anything objectively wrong, right? You didn't get a decision in your favor, but the next time you did, it seems fair. One time you didn't, but you remember the first time you didn't get a decision in your favor, you felt really sad about it, right? The second time you felt elated, and if you knew that you were going to be treated fairly every time, it probably would. The downs and highs would be maybe not as memorable, not as a rush of experience, right? Judgment also require, there's an understanding that there's some randomness that creates meaning in life, right? And creates excitement, creates opportunities, creates the variable existence that makes it wonderful to be human, right? It's like I say, if we create a system that absolutely for sure penalizes everybody that goes over 5 miles an hour in their car, we're going to be miserable. All right. Laws are made to be general. The 55 was an arbitrary number, right? Somebody going 65, somebody going 45 because of different feelings and stuff, and willing to take risks of a ticket and stuff, and are doing it fairly responsibly. We exist as a society where there's different levels of skill at different kinds of points of being, and there are different willingness to take risks. And if somebody obviously becomes too risky, they got to face consequences, but there has to be a little leeway. There has to be a give in the system that is hard for AI to do, whereas people can do that pretty easily.
And I think that level of sensitivity in working with us and us helping companies have their own sovereign server, really have to understand that we are the humans that are helping you build these systems. And we want the system to support your vision and your humanity.
Yeah.
So, we've been up in the clouds here, kind of talking at the highest level, but I see us starting to also, as we're building the components within a sovereign server, that we can actually get online here and demonstrate and teach people how these systems can work. And I'm happy to share the back end of our sovereign server on the Charged Up to show some of the ways that we're using these tools.
Yeah, it's real cool. I mean, I'm glad that we're getting some use cases. We're in the point where we're doing customer code development, right? We're getting some working things in place, and some people are enjoying what we're doing. We're looking for a few more code development, as you're admirably going after, and we hope to really build something that's going to be wonderful for everybody. And we already built some things that are really efficient and wonderful for people.
Yeah. So I would absolutely recommend trying out our content transformer. We offer it it's a component of Sovereign Server, but it's also something that is demonstrable and that actually adds a lot of value. We found it super helpful in writing the newsletter and producing our content.
Yep. I've seen it grow.
So, well, this is our first conversation of many. Thank you. It was fun putting the questions together with you and kind of planning this out. And I look forward to our next kind of more hands-on helping people learn to do this.
All right. Sounds great. All right.
Terrific. All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us, and y'all have a